The BBC has come under a lot of fire. It's facing a billion-dollar legal threat, a leadership crisis and heavy public scrutiny. There are so many unanswered questions about the corporation's future. So how did we get here? And what happens next?
Some breaking news coming into us here at Sky regarding the BBC. We are hearing that BBC Director General Tim Davie and the CEO of News, Deborah Turness, have resigned.
This was a moment that caught many in the media off guard. Journalists had been aware of growing tension inside the BBC, but few expected that we'd see two of its top bosses quit on the same night.
In a statement released tonight, Mr Davie has said, "I wanted to let you know that I have decided to leave the BBC after 20 years. This is entirely my decision, and I remain very thankful to the chair and board for their unswerving and unanimous support throughout my entire tenure, including during recent days."
Accusations that the BBC executive had not been dealing properly with issues when they came to light
have really called into question those basic tenets of what the BBC stands for, trust and accountability.
Remember that if you're talking about impartiality, there is also the other side of the spectrum.
That could threaten the future of the BBC there.
It all started with this front page by The Telegraph on the 4th of November, quoting a leaked internal memo they'd gotten hold of, written by Michael Prescott, an advisor to the BBC's Editorial Standards Committee, who'd left that role in June. He raised concerns about institutional bias over Gaza, gender identity, and the subject that got the most pickup, Donald Trump.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
That's where this episode of Panorama comes in, which spliced up Trump's speech ahead of the Capitol Hill riot, sandwiching together two bits of audio recorded over 50 minutes apart. Right-leaning commentators, media outlets and politicians like former Prime Minister Boris Johnson were furious, framing it as proof of a long-suspected bias against Conservatives. And news of high-level resignations were met with delight from the US President, who posted this. The top people in the BBC, including Tim Davie, the boss, are all quitting/fired because they were caught doctoring my very good speech of January 6th. These are very dishonest people who tried to step on the scales of a presidential election. As this all unfolded, one of the biggest questions was why nobody from the BBC had responded to the articles battering the corporation.
It's not just that the Trump video was faked, it was the fact that Mr Davie and Ms Turners knew that it was faked for the last 6 months and they did nothing about it, they remained silent. And that's just completely unacceptable. When
News CEO Deborah Turness came into work the morning after she'd announced she was off, she said this.
I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News and to work with our brilliant team of journalists. I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider. And if you'd excuse
why did you fail to deal with the mistakes that were made?
And see my teams. Thank you so much.
Hinting there was more to this story than meets the eye. And on the Monday, we learnt this. Sky News understands that Deborah Turness had wanted to get a statement out early last week, but was blocked by the BBC board, which was arguing over the wording. Now, some of the BBC's own journalists have gone on the record to say what we're actually seeing play out now goes back much further than the last week, with claims that within the BBC there are those who have systematically set out to undermine Tim Davie and his senior leadership for a long time now, a coup being the implication from within the BBC board. The name Sir Robbie Gibb coming up a lot. He's a former Downing Street communications director turned BBC board member who helped launch GB News. His appointment to the board in 2021 was supported by Conservative figures who viewed him as someone who could challenge what they saw as a liberal bias from within the corporation. When Davie finally returned to the office on Tuesday, he had a 45-minute video call with his staff.
I do hear everyone when we have to be very clear and stand up for our journalism. We are a unique and precious organisation. And I see the free press, I see the weapon under pressure, I see the weaponisation. I think we've got to fight for our journalism I'm really proud of our work, and the amazing work locally, globally that we're doing is utterly precious. We have made some mistakes that have cost us, but we need to fight for that.
When questioned on rumours of an alleged coup, BBC Chair Samir Shah, who'd been sat next to him on that call, said he wasn't a believer in conspiracy theories. If Shah and Davey were hoping to leave the coup talk at that, it didn't work. I'm told staff who'd submitted questions about the alleged plotter-in-chief, board member Sir Robbie Gibb, became so frustrated that their questions were being vetted and not shown to everyone that out of desperation they started writing their questions into the comment boxes that were public, just to let it be known their concern about political influence at the top. A screenshot sent to Sky News anonymously showed staff were enraged about what might have been going on behind the scenes. Former senior insiders say the BBC's problems aren't just in the boardroom.
I think we're now seeing that there was, of course, the leaks to the Telegraph, and some of the campaigning inside the BBC probably does have a degree of political motivation. But then equally, we know this year that Lisa Nandy, the Labour Culture Secretary, seemed at one point to be trying to get Tim Davie fired. And the fact is the BBC always has these political cross currents, and it's got to withstand them.
In the Commons, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy said this.
Those in this House attacking the BBC from left and right for not expressing views they agree with should consider just what is at stake. There is a fundamental difference between raising serious concerns over editorial failings and members of this House launching a sustained attack on the institution itself. Because the BBC is not just a broadcaster, it is a national institution that belongs to us all.
While the government has seemed keen to show their support for the corporation itself, Tim Davie's days were arguably numbered before this. In truth, journalists like myself have spent more time here at New Broadcasting House over the last couple of years than we have in the last decade. As Director Generals go, Davie, in his 5 years in charge, had deflected so many stories away that the tabloids had given him the nickname Teflon Tim. He'd perfected the art of strategic invisibility and presided over some major missteps. Within his first year, the BBC had to apologise over Martin Bashir's world-famous interview with Princess Diana in 1995. In April 2024, news presenter Hugh Edwards resigned from the BBC on medical advice. However, Davie was later forced to defend not sacking him after learning of his child abuse images arrests the year prior. Earlier this year, UK media regulator Ofcom ruled the BBC committed a serious breach of broadcasting rules by failing to disclose that the narrator of a documentary about Gaza was the son of a Hamas official. And in July, the broadcaster issued an apology over its coverage of Bob Vylan's live performance at Glastonbury, saying, "We deeply regret that such offensive and deplorable behaviour appeared on the BBC." Also that month, MasterChef hosts Greg Wallace and John Turode were sacked following an inquiry into Wallace's alleged misconduct, which Davie said should be seen as a chance for the corporation to have a reset and make sure that people are living up to the values we expect across the board. If resignations and rumours of a coup weren't bad enough for the BBC, of course there was also a legal letter sent on behalf of President Donald Trump saying he was so enraged by how his speech was doctored, he was considering suing the BBC for $1 billion. Litigation perhaps to be expected given Trump's history of suing news organisations, having previously settled a defamation case against ABC and a legal dispute with CBS News. Howard Stringer is a former president of CBS News and a former BBC board member.
You should know when you're dealing with a president, as I did, because I had problems with President Reagan and President Nixon. You've got to be very careful with presidents. They have an army of lawyers behind them. So your pursuit of your story, truth and fairness must come first. And if you don't get it right, you'll pay a price.
The BBC responded to that deadline by apologising, promising not to broadcast the Panorama episode again, but saying, while it sincerely regretted the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. For an organisation that's been paralysed by fear and internal division, this was a pivotal moment. Stand by its journalists, act decisively, or risk losing the reputation it's spent decades building. To compound the BBC's week from hell, then fresh allegations emerged that Newsnight had also made a similarly misleading edit of that Trump speech, which the corporation is now also having to look into. Now, steadying this ship will be a must, and with Tim Davie on his way out, the search for his successor is now officially underway. High-profile media figures such as Charlotte Moore of Sony Pictures, Jay Hunt of the British Film Institute and Alex Mahon, formerly of Channel 4, have all been mentioned as potential contenders. The real question is, though, who would actually want the job? As the BBC navigates its financial future, liaising with the government ahead of its charter renewal in 2027, it faces the unenviable task of steadying an organisation that seems to be tearing itself apart. For a broadcaster whose foundations are built on trust and accountability, some serious missteps have been exposed. The person charged with cleaning up this mess, restoring order and guiding the BBC through the storm of culture war scrutiny will inherit a poisoned chalice. While everyone at the BBC might be desperately keen to move on, the drama continues. Staff here who are used to reporting the news, having to get used to being the story.